What's up, YouTube? It's Taco Twans here. Welcome back to our channel. And if this is your first time joining us, please make sure to hit that subscribe button. And if you like the videos, please make sure to give it a thumbs up. Today we are here at upTOP Overland, and as you can see, it's Micah's truck here. And we are here today to pick up our one of the racks that he has available for our black taco. We're gonna be picking up the Bravo rack today, but we're gonna go inside, we're gonna talk to Micah, and we're gonna show you guys the difference between the two racks he has and see what else he has in store. So let's go.
So when you get it unboxed and lay it out, you're going to notice it's got 6 load bars, left side and right side, which are driver and passenger, and a front fairing. Now on this one, because we're doing the install here, the seam pod tabs have already been cut out, but on yours, when you get it, it would have a little tab in here, and it would tell you Bravo driver side, Bravo passenger side, and it's also where the logos are at, so that's how you know how it's supposed to go on the truck, like which side faces out. If you look at the side, slots, holes, slots, slots, more holes, and more holes. We'll talk about these in a minute. We don't want to start with the slots because that would allow the rack to slide back and forth and it may not go together parallel. So you're going to start here and here. So basically load bar number 2 and 5. You don't need a Loctite on these fasteners because they do come with a supplied lock washer. If you want to Loctite them, it's not going to hurt anything, but with all of our stuff, if you use Loctite at all, use blue, not red, because you do want to be able to take it apart later to add things to it, or whatever.
Blue, not red.
Blue, not red. Red is forever, man. Red is like a wedding ring that will not come off. So we're just going to start that one there. Normally we do this on the floor. I'm going to have you go to that side over there. Support that load bar. Droop underneath there for me. Come right here, grab the next 2. The production stands are not necessarily the best thing for putting them together. And you don't have to tighten this up at first. We're really just trying to get this thing framed up so that we can start adding all the load bars to it. Same thing on the other side. And you can tighten those up now that you've got all 4 of them in. What I'm going to do next is go ahead and just put this one in so it'll support the tail and you can let it go. It's resting on these 2 load bars, but if you notice, like, these won't shift. But these load bars, like the one that we just put in, would give it an inch of play back and forth. We do that so that you can move a load bar back and forth to line up on a specific mount or a piece of gear, or maybe even a rooftop tent that might just be a little off from where you needed it to be. Part of the universal nature of this is giving it a little bit of lateral movement on the load bars to line up with a set of max tracks that need to be X amount of inches or the pins don't line up. So instead of having to orient it and flip it the other way, if you want it on this side, some of these load bars will shift back and forth to let that line up.
Cool.
You can start putting those in if you want. We're just going to start all 6 load bars. That'll kind of put the frame of it together. On the front load bar, because we're putting this big, huge light bar in here, we're going to slide it all the way to the back position. So this is going to be the one that we're going to tighten up first this time. What we're talking about is that screw will nest all the way back in that slot, right? If this side's done this way and that side's done that way, then this load bar is perfectly parallel to this roof rack. Cool. So, and it's as tight as you can get it by hand, right? And then just an extra little twist to seat that lock washer. That's really all they need. Okay. You don't have to He-Man it, you don't want to torque it.
No power tools?
Yeah, we're using aircraft grade stainless steel hardware on this, so you really do want to put it together by hand. Don't use impact drivers or anything crazy like that. It's not a wheel.
It's good to know, because
Oh yeah, a lot of guys
power
do.
tools on our principal.
A lot of guys do. That's it. So then we'll tighten up these. And this is 5/32. So the exterior of the racks for us, the load bars, that's all Imperial hardware, SAE, quarter 20. And we do that because if you were to strip this out in your driveway, you can always find a quarter 20 tap at Home Depot. You're not going to find an M6, an M8, you know, or whatever. So back load bar, the number 6 load bar in the rear. If you look here, see the 3 holes? So if you're running our optional thin fin, you can run this back load bar in the same configuration as this. So it goes here, giving you 2 inches of mount surface in the back. If you're not going to run the thin fin, the factory shark fin antenna sits right underneath where this load bar would be. So you put this load bar in here with these 2 holes, it flips backwards. It's still dead level with the other load bars. It's just 1 inch wide here, 2 inches wide this way. It still gives you enough surface area to mount lights or a chase light or anything else that you want to mount to it. But it's a cost-effective way to get the 6th load bar all the way back so that you're full length on the roof rack of the truck, or on the roof of the truck, right? So. When you get a Bravo and you take it out of the package, some of the holes on the sides have little colored dots stuck to them that correspond to colored dots that come on the little feet. The feet for the Bravo are the same feet as the Alpha. It's the exact same foot because the offset and the load bar width is identical, right? So see in there where it says A, and then it says Taco Alpha V2 and there's a little arrow. Okay. A is right here. A and B is the driver's side. C and D is the passenger side, but the arrow faces forward. So we're gonna put that up in there like this and bolt it in with the supplied M8 hardware. It'll go across here, right? Same thing on the rest of them, but the back foot looks like this. It gives you the offset to get this bolted in. Like that, okay? And then the hardware drops down in here and it just bolts together. It comes with supplied spacers to go up, but we'll get into that when we get into punching the gaskets and all that crazy shit. A foot to the A location. You take the M8 button head fastener and just slide it through the hole. On the inside of the rack, you align that same hole with the foot. And then it's washer and lock washer, or lock nut. And you go ahead and just start them all. You want to snug these up to where they're not moving, but you don't really need to over tighten them at this point because once you set it up on the truck, the foot's going to move to take the arc of the truck where it's sitting on top of the spacers up inside of the jam. So 5mm Allen wrench, 13mm socket, and that's it. I can still move that, right? Once we get it on the truck, we get everything squared up, we get the bolts and everything started, then we can tighten it up. At that point, you really could put it on the truck. If you had a Bravo rack that had a no-cut front fairing, you would be installing it right now and it physically would be ready to go up on the truck. We're gonna pause and we're gonna do a little bit of wiring and light bar installation on the front of this thing, and then we'll come back to how you actually square this up and get this up on the truck and stuff like that. But if it was a traditional Bravo, just no cut, ready to rock and roll, it's ready to go on the truck, yeah. This ships with every fairing that we have that has a light bar in it. It's kind of a universal way of being able to mount most conventional light bars into one of our fairings because it gives you adjustment up and down here and then articulating the light bar up and down inside of here, inside of the X, and then once you get that, then you can also rotate the light bar inside the fairing to get the alignment. The instructions that come with the roof rack do have a pretty good description of how to mount this together and how to align the light bar. Obviously you want to make sure that it's dark outside, but how to get it out and what we expect the projection to be and get the angle set properly so that you don't have the mirrored reflection on the hood of the truck. Some of these lights are just bright, right? So they'll light up like the whole front end of the truck, and when you're doing night wheeling in the dust, it's really disorienting. So if you've got to get it aimed just right. 50 mil lock washer and a washer, and then aluminum spacer. So this goes to the light, and we don't know where yet, right? We have no idea where, so it doesn't really matter. This goes like this, and then this will thread into the light bar. And I want to tighten it up just enough that it won't move around, but I want to leave it loose enough that I can still back it around and stuff. So get this out, and we kind of laying on top of it here. I'm looking at this, and this does line up. So next side's going to be the same thing in reverse. We have the fairing just sitting inside the housing here, and so these holes align with these holes. So we're going to slide that back, kind of wiggle it until those two go through. Same thing on the other side. Get you lined up. There it is. Where'd it go? That and that. Okay. You've got the stud sticking through, so we're going to get a washer, whoa, and a lock nut. Like that. Just get the 13mm wrench in there on that nut, and then just tighten these up. And that's it. So we'll get the light bar partially aligned, and then we'll really finish it when it's on the truck. Right now it's tilted down, it's just kind of hanging in its housing. So your Bravo rack ships with two baggies of spacers. They're labeled front and rear, long and short, but this is the physical difference between them. You see how much longer this spacer is than this spacer? This is a front spacer, so it goes here when you go onto the truck, right? These are the rears. If you get them backwards, physically what will happen is the rack will not only be at a really funny angle, but you would probably come into contact with the exterior of the truck up here at the front. The spacers are critical to the low profile fit on the roof rack. You have to get this right. So we've labeled them front and rear, long and short, but you need to be able to physically look at them and know that the shorter ones go in the back of the truck, and it's 4 and 4. the screws will thread themselves. That's why you drill that hole at 9/64 inch, and then you're using a little M4 screw. And as long as they line up, they'll literally thread their self into the aluminum. That's why you don't have to use any Loctite or anything weird like that. So to get this out, we've got to pop this up, and I'm just using a little plastic wedge. I think they call it a spudger, is what they call it. Okay, so you just pop that up like that, and then you're gonna pull the factory seal up. And when you start to pull on it, you're gonna notice like there's some foam tape underneath there. If you just keep your finger right at it and pull with it, you don't want to really crank on this because there's a little thin piece of metal in here that helps it keep the shape of the roof. And if you really yank on it, you can kink that. So just work your way back. Okay, and then the next is it's just attached with that clip right there into this little housing up here, right up there. And so you want to keep the two sides separate for now. So there's the passenger side. We're going to do the same thing on the driver's side. Then we're going to line up, if you get the dust out of here, see that little piece of plastic? If you push, you can see the holes. Okay, there's also a middle one. We're not going to use the middle one. That one stays with the factory seal. So we're going to be using these two here and these two right there. Right there and right there. And we're going to use those to line this up so that we can punch the gasket with the punch so that the spacers fit right down between it, and it just adds that extra level of water seal. So you just take your finger and kind of push down, and you'll see the rubber push down into the hole. And a little razor knife, start in the center, and just cut that out of the way and expose the threads. You can see the M6 threaded nuts there, it's already in there. And the same thing here. Right? So we need to line the center of these two nutserts up with the center of this gasket. The easiest way to do that is to just use masking tape, and I'm going to put it across the middle of that hole. In the middle of that hole. Now, smart money here is that you would mark which edge of the masking tape is the center of the hole, right? Because if you go to put this back in now, all of a sudden I don't remember if it was this side or this side, right? So just set this back where it goes. With that clicked in place, we're just going to draw that line across here. And as far as this way, it's the middle. Pretty simple. If you want to measure it, you can measure it, but it's just the center of this. But that'll help align those two holes. So then you pop this back out. You can pull the tape off. And you're going to do the same thing for all of them, right? We'll punch this one now so you can see, and then we'll put it back up and do the front. You can see where we've done it.
Yeah.
I use a block of wood because you don't want the punch to go all the way through and cram down either onto your garage floor and screw up your epoxy or chip the end of your punch. This is just a 19 millimeter or 3/4 inch tapered punch. If you go on Amazon and just type in 19 millimeter punch, you'll see a ton of them. Just make sure you get a tapered one. It makes it push this rubber plug out on its own. And the reason that we're doing it with this and not a unibit or a drill bit is because, like I said, there's a metal spine in here that keeps this thing rigid. And so you've really got to be able to just punch right through that to get like a perfect hole. So just line that up in the center of that. Okay, and it'll just push right out. You can see the metal. So you really got to whack on it to get it. It takes a few good hits to get it through. Put your foot on that and it'll keep it from bouncing. It'll be a lot fucking quieter. And so our spacer will fit right through it. Right. So you're going to apply silicone up there before you put the hardware in anyway, but this just adds one extra layer of rubber seal between this and this to allow water to not pull up right there where we don't want to get water through the roof of the truck.
Yeah.
You can go up and use this to tell you where that's supposed to go. And you push that in and it'll be centered right around those two holes. That's it. And we just need to do the same thing to the other side and we're ready to put the sealant in the hole. So these are the bolts that will actually attach the rack to the roof. Socket cap, 5mm. They're 55 millimeters long, so it's lock, washer, and washer. And there are 8 of them, so we're gonna go ahead and set them all up. So sealant, right, and spacers have to go on prior to. The main thing is you don't wanna get this stuff all over your hands, and it's just a regular silicone, 25-year lifespan, I think is what it is. 20. Sorry, you're 5 years short. 20 years, this is only gonna last 20 years. But you wanna pump this into the threaded holes and then around and then seat the spacer. That way it's clean, it's down inside of here, it's not gonna get on the truck, it's not gonna get in our hands. So just fill the hole up and then rotate your way out until it's almost to the top of that gasket. Like that. And then short spacers in the back, long spacers in the front. So now I'm just going to twist on that and seat it down in the hole. And the cool part about the punched gasket is it really does a good job of holding the spacer in place while you set the roof rack up here. If you tried to cut this or just take this out completely, the spacer's just sitting in that little glob of silicone, and when you go to set the roof rack up here, you knock them over, and then you got to fumble with it, and then you're going to get the shit all over your hands. So doing it with the punch, it holds those exactly where they're supposed to be. And when we come up with the rack, we're literally coming up and setting the feet on top of this. We're never going to come into contact with the truck. From here, going all the way up. Just try and line the feet up over the spacers and just set it down. Okay. You keep your hand on it. You got it?
Yep.
Okay. I'm gonna get a ladder and start going around and setting the bolts.
Okay.
All I'm doing right now, Twan, is just going around and getting bolts started. There's some load bars that we have to shuck around to get everything to line up. Like this one is in the way of here. So we'll take this bolt out on both sides and rotate the load bar. And the front load bar that we have all the way back right now, I'll need to push forward to reach the other foot. You really do want to kind of get these started as much by hand as you can. That foot will go down like that right there. And then you just kind of push it down in there, wiggle it around, and you'll feel it kind of slip into the hole, and it'll start to thread like that right there. I don't need to overly tighten these right now. More than anything, this is just a process of getting all the bolts started. Then we'll go around and torque them all down the way they're supposed to be. So a small note about the factory threaded inserts in Toyotas. If you feel any pressure when you're putting the bolts in, like if it feels like it's tightening before you know it's in all the way, start working that fastener back and forth like this and kind of use it to clean up the factory threads, because they do go on and then the truck is either dipped or sprayed in that anti-rust, whatever, you can see it down in the holes. Sometimes it balls up in those threads. Okay, I've got the 4 that I can get to. They're all started, right? We know those are smooth. So now we're going to loosen this load bar and slide it forward to access this one. And we're going to take out the back bolt of this load bar and flip this load bar sideways. We don't have to remove it from the rack. We just need to be able to rotate it to reach that bolt. Grab that piece of hardware. There you go. Now we're just going to literally rotate this up, and that's going to give us access to the bolt hole in these other feet. One of the biggest differences that you'll see on an upTOP versus any other rack that's out there, the majority of them are shifted back a little further and the fairings come down and then they touch the truck, or they get really close to the truck and they want to use like a rubber channel or something else like that to be a wind deflector. Our design literally splits the wind and allows the aerodynamics of the truck to still do its job. So the upper part of our fairing is for the gear that you have loaded on the roof rack. The bottom angle shoots the wind across this and then allows it to go over the top of the truck as Toyota intended. That is why our fairing is shaped the way that it is. The basic components for getting this apart, if you look, you got the grab handles on both sides, passenger and driver, and then these 2 luggage hooks back here, and then these 2 pieces of plastic. That's efficiently what's in the way of us getting the headliner down enough that we can access the jam nut on the antenna to break it loose and pop it out of the truck so that we can do the thin fin modification and get the wiring through the roof of the truck. So we're going to start with a couple pry tools and stuff, and if you zoom in here, there's no mechanical fastener to any of this stuff. It's all pressure plastic. It all snaps together. So up inside of here is a little metal clip, and then this is a cap, and when you push that cap in, it spreads that metal clip apart and pushes it up into a square hole behind here, and that's what locks it in enough that you can really pull on it, and it works like a real grab handle. So the thought that you could just pop these off and unbolt them, that doesn't exist. There's some very small tab holes for a pry tool in these that you can work a little spoon into and then start popping them loose, and then once you get them loose like a tooth, you just wiggle them and then pull them the rest of the way out. When we get to that point, you'll be able to see those 2 metal clips and you'll understand a little bit more about how these work. All of these work the same way, but the clips for these are different than the clips from these. So if you're like every other guy that takes his truck apart and throws everything in one big cup and you go to put this back together later, count them, right? You'll have 4 metal clips that are exactly the same and 2 that are a little bit different. The 2 go to the 2, the 4 go to these. Okay? All right, so on the side, right here and right here is, and it may be a little more visible right there. See that little rectangular notch right there? If you get your tool in here, you can see it pop loose. Okay? One side. Get the other side going. The problem is when you pry against one, it wants to push the other one back in. So you kind of have to put your finger between them, and then you can get it loose enough. So once it's broken loose all the way across like that, it's ready to start coming out. So see that little clip right there? That's what's pushing in this little metal retainer. So we need to get the other side the same way. There we go. Right like that. Now, see the shiny? Those are the little metal retainers. Those plastic pieces that we just took out push those fingers apart and make them grip up inside of there. So, needle nose pliers and a little pick tool. And we're going to kind of thumb this down and get it loose. And then we're going to try and grab it, and all I'm trying to do right now isn't take that out. I'm trying to get this compressed enough that this piece slips around it like that. and then you can just pinch this and take it out. So when you go to put it together, see how that fits right over the top of it? You push this up and get it lined up, and then you push that like that, and they go in and it will click, and we'll put it back together when we're done, but that's how they go. Now try and explain that to somebody over the phone. So that's this side, other side is the exact same way, and now we'll move on to the cargo hook. All right, same thing, little slot. And that's its finger, right? And this one's a little bit different as far as its design. You can pinch this one pretty easily, and it'll just slip right out. And then you pull that with your hand. I said you pull it with your hand. You pull it with your pliers. That's tight. There we go. One and two. Okay. So same thing, when you go to put it back in, it just slips over that and it'll seat. So what you don't want to do is try and put this up in and then smush the metal piece in and then try and push this in, because you can't fumble around with it enough to make that work, right? So like this was pretty straightforward to do, so we'll put it back together. Like you get it going and you'll hear it click, and now it's a cargo hook again, right? And you'll have to do this one and then this luggage handle, grab handle, and that grab handle. And once those four pieces are out, we've got to get to this to get this down enough to let the headliner drop down so that we can reach up in there and get to the nut. Now, let's talk about these things. So, the seat belts don't actually have to be unbolted. We will have to fold the seats down to get enough room to do all this. But there's a bolt behind this SRS airbag thing. And if I just take that same pry tool and I start digging at this, I'm gonna chew this all up. It's a really soft plastic, right? But Toyota's pretty smart, so something that you can do is if you push in really hard at the top of this, you can get a pry tool in it and pop that guy out to get to that 10mm bolt without chewing this all up, so you'll never even know you were in there. All right, so again, I'm just gonna push really hard, and all you're doing is pushing hard enough up here, like back behind it, to get a gap. So if I push really hard, I'm out. And up inside of here is a 10mm bolt. So I'm going to use a ratchet and just back that one out and the other one out. There it is. Just a regular M6 10mm bolt. It holds this in so that if the airbag does deploy across here, it's clipped in here and allows us to kind of push out so that the airbag can still do its job. All right, so same thing on the other side, but where we're going with this is to get this stuff down and out of the way. Let me get my thumbs back behind here and start pushing. Let me let the seat down. A little easier for us to see it. Okay. So in the grand scheme of things, this is actually clipped in behind here, but you don't have to remove this to get this out. You push this way. You'll hear it pop. And then we just need these two pieces to unseat from each other. So I'll use my little tool again. And if you get up in there, you can see those clips. That's what you're fighting with. It's just this plastic clip right here. So a little bit of pressure to get it to start, and then it'll go ahead and come apart. There's another one right back behind it, right there. And then I'm loose. That's where the bolt was that we took out, and then you've got those three clips that were keeping us from going. So you can literally just drop this down, from this point, this is almost ready to fall down enough that we can get to this without taking the whole truck apart or anything crazy. So we're going to do the same thing to the other side, and then this headliner will drop down enough that we can reach the antenna. Okay, so from here, the headliner will just drop down enough. Now, a note on this is if you really yanked on this, because it has tension back here, you would see it start to pull against right here, and it may kink it or crease it. We don't need it down very far. We just got to get to one nut on the back of the antenna, and then we're done with this. But if you did pull down on it and it wants to crease a little bit, as long as you don't mess with it, if you don't like push on it with your hands or anything crazy, if you put the headliner back where it goes, in a day or two, those will come right out. If you shine your camera up in there, see that nut right there?
Yep.
That's the antenna. So I just used an adjustable inch. One little turn to loosen it up. And that's it. We need to take this out of here, and then another one out of there, and then that one is actually clipped in. So I've got to come over there and we use a pry tool to pull that one loose. There's a little clip right there. See it? We need that out of here. And then if you follow this back, right inside of here, push this out of the way, is the plug to the antenna, right? So it's just white and it's above the passenger side seat belt. So there's a little clip that you push on and it'll just unplug, okay? So once we have all that loose, we're free all the way up to the antenna. Go up. You just take the shark fin and literally take it right out of the truck. Now, all of this, the base and everything, we're going to retain all that. What we're really doing is taking this apart, pulling the shark fin part off and retransplanting the guts of this to the thin fin, and we're going to add a second hull here that gets hidden underneath the factory antenna. So if it's a lease truck or anything like that, you're never going to know that anything was in here when you go to take the rack off. And when you put it all back together, bolt it back in, the factory gasket seals this hole up, everything's good to go, and you get to pass all the wires through for your lighting. The 6 screws on the bottom are what we're worried about right now. I'm going to take these out. So it'll separate. This is what we're keeping, and this is what we're getting rid of. The factory antenna is up in here. See that little metal nub right there? When you put it together, it goes right here. This is the actual antenna for your HD and FM, AM radio signal. And this little guy is your satellite radio antenna. Okay, so back here in this empty space is where we're going to mark and drill a hole that will turn around and transfer to the truck so that we can route the wiring from the thin fin through here, through the truck, and then onto your switching controller, whatever that's going to be. This is just a rubber gasket. It unpeels, and we'll be retaining it. Probably the only complex part of this is that your thin fin comes with this little coiled up antenna tail, and we need to permanently solder it into here so that this can coil up inside of here and act as your antenna, because we took it out with this, right? So I got a soldering iron, got solder, tin our little lead here. We're going to put one little drop on here. Hot. There we go. Got one little fray guy here. There we go. So that's attached. That's really all there is to it. And then we're going to mark this here, and really you're drilling it between all these letters. Seems to be like the perfect spot. And then you'll transfer this to the truck and index that hole, then you'll drill the hole in the top of the truck. But that's how the wires are going to come through and go. So we'll do this part next, and then we'll put the cap together. The main thing is we don't want a bunch of aluminum shavings getting up into this area here, so I'll just prop this up, do a little pilot hole. And it's a super soft metal, man. It's not a difficult thing to drill a hole in at all. So we're good there. We use a Unibit Harbor Freight, right, to expand this hole, and because this one's going to throw away more chips, we drill this one from the back. Okay. And we just run that all the way through until it goes through the base. It'll be a 1/2 inch hole. It's a Unibit. They call it a step bit, same thing. But that way none of the contaminant dropped up into here. Okay. So the rubber gasket's going to have to be notched. So we got that there. Take the Sharpie, mark that hole again, peel it back off. A little hobby knife, and just cut if you meet anybody that can cut a circle with a razor knife, I want to meet them. The point is just notch that to clear that hole. Pull that out of the way. Now we can put this back onto the truck real quick to mark where we're going to drill the hole so that it just lines up and the wires will pass right through. This you just want to feed in here for now, because we're going to turn around and take it right back out. So right there is where we're going to drill our little 1/2 inch hole. You can stick your finger in here, and I can't touch the headliner, right? Like, it's way down in there. So you're not really in any danger of coming into contact unless you use some gangster long drill bit. We're going to use that same pilot bit and Unibit that we used to make the hole in the antenna, so we know that our length is good. And another thing about this hole is actually coming out behind the metal brace inside the roof. So even if you did this blind, you still couldn't come into contact with the headliner. Same thing with anything else. You always want to do a pilot hole first. Just get it in the center. And that'll show you how much clearance there is in there, right? Like, no problem. That's it. That hole lines up with the hole in the antenna, right? So we provide a harness with a thin fin that's a little over 18-ish feet long. If you run it down the driver's side, it's long enough to come out by the dashboard. If you snake it right, it's long enough to go through the firewall and go to like where an S-Pod would mount. And when you get them, one end is always taped up and it says cab. That's the part that goes through the antenna. The other end will have a loom on it that's UV treated, and that's where you're going to put the other side of the 6-pin plug that we ship with it to terminate the wiring. One of the things that's pretty cool about this, if you'll hold that, is the harness that we send you will fit through one side. So it leaves you this other side if you wanted to add more wiring for solar or cell phone chargers for rooftop tents, anything crazy like that. You have this other port. You would need to modify the hull size to get the wires to go through, but we give you the second port on here to get those through. So find the end that says cab. Pretty long, right? Feed that through the antenna. All 9 million feet of it. And you're going to push that through, and then it'll turn to electrical tape, right? And then it should start to seat itself. Just give it a twist and push it down in there. And that's kind of going to lock it in place before we apply the sealant to it. But that'll kind of keep it. That's how you know where to stop. Same thing with the big gigantic end. Feed it through here. Okay. We start to get down to it here. So the sealant that you're going to apply, you're really only going to put it around the wire that you ran in and the other hole if you're not using it. That's it. We don't need to apply sealant here because when you bolt the antenna down, the factory gasket actually seals it back to the roof, right? And we just use the same silicone that we use for the spacers on the roof, right? So I'm gonna put that down in there. That's it. So we have to coil this up and we will make sure it doesn't get stuck by any of its screws. So just kind of push it in there. That's what it should look like. Factory plug and then the thin fin harness. And we put the 6 screws back in. So I got this big pigtail that corresponds to what we're going to wire up to the plug from the wiring that we completed earlier. So I'm going to keep it from getting twisted around. So feed the factory antenna through the factory antenna hole first. Feed that through that hole. And what I will do now is I'm going to go under there and I'm going to grab it and feed it through to make sure that it's feeding on this side of that metal brace that's in there. Because if I get all 20 feet of it balled up inside of there, it's going to be hard to get out, right? It's long-winded like this, but we wanted to make sure that you had enough material to actually pull the thing through and not have to do a bunch of soldering and splicing. That's our pigtail. This is the wiring for our rack. We've got some slack that we'll have to deal with, but because we've just added the thin fin to the Bravo, now we can take this load bar loose and flip it this way, right? So you get the full 2-inch connectivity across the top. And the wiring that we did earlier will rotate with it, and then we'll be able to bring this around and terminate it and plug it right in. So the only step from here is to reach back up underneath there and put the nut back on the factory antenna and then reassemble the headliner and snake the wiring. trick in snaking the wiring is you want to be on the inside of the factory side curtain airbag. Do not run it across here. You want to push it up on top of the headliner and keep it behind the antenna as it goes, or the airbag as it goes all the way around. So we'll come back and fish this later. We have enough of this to finish what we're doing. So, factory nut. The little yellow cup goes to the back. We want to come back now and put the antenna back in. It's pretty important that you put it back into all the clips that you pulled it out of earlier, because if you don't, this antenna cable will vibrate against the headliner and it will drive you insane. So I'm going to make sure that all the clips are back in. Okay. And then you want to snake it and plug it back in. And when you plug it back in, plug it in until you hear it click like that. And then give it a tug and make sure that it's seated. If you don't get that plugged in all the way, you get done with your install and everything's put back together and you're getting no FM reception and you're not getting your weather and your HD radio information, check this connection. That's what the problem is. So we're going to push the headliner back up in. And I don't think it necessarily matters which ones you put back in first, but I usually start with the little cargo hook because there's only one per side and then I don't have to fight with the grab handle. Whoa. Headliner's back in, right? So now we'll go to here and put these back together and then we'll put the cargo hooks back in. Because the main thing is to just get the headliner up and get it out of your way so that you can put it back together. Put those two pieces back together first. All I'm doing right now is just getting those little white push clips lined up with the hulls before I push on this thing. So you can kind of move them around with your fingers. All those are back. We're ready for that 10mm bolt. If you look, this one's spring loaded, so this one's kind of a pain in the butt. But if you look, they have a different shape to them. See that? The bigger, rounder corner goes to the bigger, rounder corner over here. So that makes this one of this side. So one of the cheats is that you can put it in so that you can get this one in and then you can do the other one. So take the clip. Come on, buddy. That's it. So come up to the driver's side, we've got to get this wire around the C-pillar and then continue down to here so you can see how much of this we really have left. It's more than enough to come down and go to the switch panels that are available for here or over there, or the controllers that go out underneath the hood. So get the end back. So, same thing here. We want to push it far enough that it's on the back side of that side curtain airbag. And it'll follow all the way down the A-pillar. And then put the gasket back in. Make sure that you seat these corners really tight, because that's where the water would get in. If you didn't get them in all the way, that's where you would pick up your water. Next time you went through an automatic car wash, shower time. All right, so this is what we're left with. We got another, I don't know, 6.5, 7 feet of it. And we're gonna come back and do this with the switches and the wiring. For now, we'll leave that right there and then we'll finish that off. But I think that's it.
Just send me